Zurika had never felt quite like this before, not in all her years as a diplomat, or during any of her intergalactic travels. Nothing had prepared her for the strange sensation that washed over her the moment she stepped onto Earth. She had visited countless planets in her young life, each one different and each one with its own unique challenges and opportunities. But none of them had made her feel like this. She felt as though she had stepped into a world that was alive in a way that no other place was alive. The air was thick with a certain kind of energy, as if the planet itself was breathing with her, its pulse resonating in her chest. And that pulse was human. It was the people she would soon meet, the creatures she had been sent to observe and learn about. But the sense of something more, something ancient and raw, had already started to sink into her bones before she even knew what she was feeling. She couldn't place it, not yet. But she knew something was wrong, and it was too late to turn back. The Tana Dominion had long classified humanity as a primitive species. They were thought to be insignificant, a dying race too absorbed in their petty conflicts and limited technology to ever pose a threat to anyone. But that was before Zurika's mission, before she set her eyes on Earth and realized that there was something more here, something that had been buried long ago and left unnoticed by the rest of the galaxy. Earth was a mess. She thought primitive buildings and clumsy technology covered the surface as the people rushed around like ants, but it was also alive and different. Something was hidden within the chaos, something dangerous, something that would make her entire species rethink their approach to this world. As Zurika stood on the landing pad of the Tana shuttle, her gaze swept over the throngs of humans below, all of them oblivious to her presence. Though they couldn't have missed the giant ship hovering above them, she felt their eyes on her in a way that made her uneasy. There was something about the humans that didn't fit the mold of the typical species she had encountered before. Most creatures simply looked at her with curiosity or indifference. But humans, they were different. They seemed to be constantly searching, constantly striving, with a fire in their eyes that Zurika couldn't understand. But it unsettled her in a way that both terrified and fascinated her. She wondered what it was that gave them such strength. What was it that allowed them to thrive where so many other species faltered? Zurika was soon ushered into a large meeting room where she was introduced to a human named Dart Elias, a linguist who had been assigned to help facilitate communication between her and the Earth officials. Elias was middle-aged with a calm demeanor and a quiet intelligence that Zurika immediately found intriguing. They exchanged pleasantries as they sat down to begin their talks. But Zurika couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this human, something that felt both familiar and alien at the same time. She could sense that he was watching her just as intently as she was watching him, and as the conversation progressed, Zurika couldn't help but notice how quickly Elias slipped into a strange and ancient language, a language that was unfamiliar to her yet familiar at the same time. At first, Zurika thought it was just a mistake, but then she realized with growing horror that Elias was speaking with ease in the very language of a long-forgotten civilization, a language that had been thought to be lost for centuries and had never been heard by any living species since it had faded from memory after the great wars of the galaxy. Zurika felt the shock rush through her system as she processed the implications of what she was hearing. How was it possible that a human, a simple creature from a backwater planet, could speak a language that no one had heard for thousands of years? Her heart raced as she tried to maintain her composure, but everything within her screamed in disbelief. Humans were supposed to be weak, unimportant. How could they have knowledge of something so ancient and powerful? Dr. Elias didn't seem to notice her shock as he continued to speak, the words flowing from his mouth like a well-practiced song. Zurika tried to follow along, but the words seemed to slip through her mind like water through her fingers. The symbols, the structure of the language were foreign to her in a way she had never experienced before. And it wasn't just the language itself that bothered her, it was the certainty with which Elias spoke, as though he had learned it not just as a scholar, but as one who had lived with it for generations, as if the language itself had always been a part of him. It wasn't just a relic of the past, it was alive, and Zurika realized with a shiver down her spine that she was facing something far greater than she had ever imagined. And this discovery could change everything. Zurika sat frozen, her mind racing as Elias continued speaking in that strange forgotten language, each word sending ripples of shock through her system. She had never encountered anything like this Before, no species in the galaxy had managed to preserve such an ancient tongue, especially not one that had vanished from the historical records centuries ago. She had heard stories of lost civilizations of ancient empires that fell into ruin and obscurity. But this was different. This was not a relic, it was living. And it was here now in the mouth of a human, a being she had always considered insignificant. How could this be happening? Elias noticed her silence and paused for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly as he studied her face. He seemed puzzled, but not alarmed, and Zerika realized that to him there was nothing unusual about speaking the language. It was just another tool for communication. And yet to her, it was nothing short of a revelation. She swallowed hard as she found her voice speaking slowly at first, trying to keep her composure. "How do you know this language?" She asked, the question hanging in the air, like a weight she could hardly bear to ask, but she had to know the answer. Elias blinked, as though he had not expected her question. Then he shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I was taught it. When I was young," he said, "it's part of my cultural heritage. It's a language that's been passed down through generations in my family. Though I admit few people still speak it today. It's an ancient tongue. But it's never been completely forgotten. There are still pockets of it scattered across Earth, ancient texts and oral traditions that preserve it." Zerika felt her heart race with every word he spoke, her mind struggling to process the information. So humans had known this language all along. They had preserved it through their history as if it was something sacred. How was that possible? How could a species that was so primitive, according to galactic standards, retain the knowledge of something so profound and ancient? She had assumed that the humans were just a species clinging to the remnants of their past. But now it seemed that they had been carrying a piece of the galaxy's lost history all this time, and it was hidden in plain sight. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. "How do you know it so well?" she pressed again, still struggling to reconcile what she was hearing. Elias hesitated for a moment before answering honestly. "I don't know the full story," he admitted. "It was always just part of who I am. My family has kept it alive for as long as I can remember. But it's not just me, there are others who speak it too, and we pass it down like a secret we don't fully understand. But it's always felt like it's been with us for as long as we've existed." Zerika could barely wrap her mind around what Elias was saying. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet in a way she couldn't control. How could this be possible? How could humans have such deep ties to a lost civilization, a civilization that her people and countless others had assumed was gone forever? Had humanity somehow been part of something far greater than anyone had realized? She stared at Elias, her thoughts spinning as she tried to connect the dots, but the more she thought, the more questions arose. How could a species that had been overlooked for so long have such hidden potential? Was humanity really just a forgotten remnant of a galactic empire, or was there something else at play? Elias must have seen the confusion in her eyes, because he offered a small smile, though there was a sadness to it. "Not all of us understand it," he said. "There are many who have forgotten or chosen not to learn, but it's always been there. It's part of who we are as a species. And there are those of us who still believe that it's important to preserve it, even if no one else sees its value." He paused, his eyes flicking to the door, as if wondering if someone might be listening. Then he leaned in closer to Zerika and said quietly, "I think there's more to our history than we've been told. I think there's a reason we still speak this language, and I think it might be connected to things that no one could ever have imagined." Zerika's mind reeled. She felt as though she was standing on the edge of something vast, something that could unravel everything she had ever known about humanity and the galaxy itself. The species had always seen Earth as insignificant, a dying world barely clinging to its survival. But now she wasn't so sure. Something was happening, something deep and powerful was stirring beneath the surface, and she had no idea where it would lead or what it would mean for her people or for the galaxy at large. But one thing was clear: this mission was no longer just about observing the humans. It was about uncovering the truth of their past and what it meant for the future of the stars. Zirika sat back in her chair trying to process the flood of information Elias had just shared with her, her mind spinning as the pieces of the puzzle began to shift and fall into place. There was something deeply unsettling about the way he spoke about humanity's forgotten language, as if it were an ancient artifact that had been carefully preserved and passed down through generations, something that had been kept alive through time, despite the odds. And yet here she was an alien diplomat trained to study the patterns and histories of countless species, and she was now realizing that she had underestimated humanity in ways that made her feel both foolish and awestruck. Her eyes drifted toward the windows of the room where Earth stretched out below them, a vibrant blue and green sphere teeming with life. The planet itself seemed so small in comparison to the galaxy she had seen, but the more she thought about it, the more she felt like it was far bigger than it appeared. There was a depth here that she couldn't fully comprehend yet, and it terrified her because she knew that her mission would be to learn all there was to know about this world and its people, and now she wasn't sure if she could ever look at humanity the same way again. "You say there are others who speak this language?" she asked quietly, turning back to Elias, her voice steady, but filled with curiosity. "Is it common among your people, or just a select few?" Elias shook his head slightly. "Not many people speak it fluently anymore," he said. "It's more of a cultural preservation thing. Some of the older families still teach it, but most people have forgotten about it or don't see it as important. I guess you could say it's a bit like a forgotten art or an old tradition that gets passed down through the generations. But even with all the people who don't understand it, we still carry pieces of it with us in our music, our stories, and our customs. It's always there, just hidden beneath the surface." Zirika listened intently, trying to grasp the enormity of what Elias was telling her. It wasn't just a language, it was a part of humanity's identity, a thread woven into the very fabric of their culture and history. And though many had let it fade into obscurity, it was still there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be rediscovered. She felt a sense of awe that she had never felt before, not for the first time since arriving on Earth. She felt something stir inside her, something that wasn't fear or curiosity, but respect for the resilience of the humans and the history they carried with them, even if they didn't fully understand it themselves. "But what does it all mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is it about this language that connects humanity to something so much older than what they know?" Elias met her gaze, his eyes deep and thoughtful, as though he were weighing the significance of her question. "It's hard to say," he said slowly, "but I think it's more than just words. I think it's a connection to something far greater, something that stretches beyond our world, beyond our time. There are legends in my family about great travelers who came from the stars, who spoke this language, and who helped shape the course of history, but the stories are fragmented and unclear. It's almost as if humanity was once part of something much bigger, something galactic, that's been forgotten over the centuries." Zirika's heart raced at his words. The idea was almost too grand to wrap her mind around, but she couldn't shake the sense of he was right. There was something buried here in humanity's past, something that reached beyond the confines of Earth's atmosphere and into the stars. Zirika felt a tremor in her chest as she processed the possibility of what Elias was hinting at. Humans were never supposed to be part of a galactic empire, at least that's what she had always been taught. They were seen as just another primitive species, caught in the web of their own survival. Yet here Elias was speaking of ancient travelers, of connections to the stars, and a hidden legacy that had somehow survived even in the face of extinction. This was more than just the discovery of a lost language. This was the beginning of something far greater, something that had the potential to reshape the galaxy's understanding of its own history. But how could this be possible? How had humanity been part of something so vast and so powerful, and yet fallen so far from it? Zirika's mind reeled as she tried to grasp the implications of Elias's words. Could humanity have been a part of a forgotten galactic empire? And if so, what had happened to it? Why had they been left behind? Why had no one ever bothered to tell her about this hidden history? Why had the humans been left to rediscover it on their own? It was a question she knew she would have to answer, but she was beginning to fear that the truth of it would be far more complicated and dangerous than she was prepared for. Zirika looked at Elias, her thoughts swirling as she tried to come to terms with everything he had just revealed. There was so much more at play here than she had ever realized, and now she had a responsibility to uncover it, to understand what humanity truly was and what their past meant for their future. But as she met Elias's gaze, she knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, and that the answers they sought might not be as simple as they hoped. Zurika felt the weight of the silence pressing in on her as Elias's words hung in the air. She had always approached her missions with a clear objective to observe and report back to the Tsanar Dominion. But now her purpose was no longer so simple. The discovery of the language had opened up an entire new world of questions and possibilities. And as much as she tried to focus on the task at hand, she couldn't shake the growing sense that humanity's history was far more intertwined with the galaxy's fate than she could have ever imagined. She had come to Earth to study a species that was deemed insignificant, and yet here she was unraveling a mystery that could shake the foundations of everything she had ever known. She glanced at Elias, whose calm demeanor had not faltered, despite the overwhelming nature of their conversation. He was sitting back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping against the table, as if deep in thought Zurika had expected him to be overwhelmed by the significance of their discussion. But instead, he seemed almost resigned, as if he had always known that there was something more to his people's past than anyone realized. It was a strange thing to see someone so deeply connected to the weight of their own history, without the urgency or fear that she herself felt in the face of what they were uncovering. She envied their calm, but she knew she couldn't afford to dwell on it now. "So what do you think this means?" she asked, her voice cutting through the stillness. Her eyes locked on Elias as she waited for his response. She needed to know how he saw this, what his interpretation was, because it seemed to her that humanity's forgotten past wasn't just something lost in the pages of history, it was something alive, something waiting to be awakened. And if she was right, if they had once been part of something far greater than what they were now, then it raised one fundamental question: what happened to them? Why had they fallen so far from grace? Elias took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that startled her. "I don't know," he said finally. "There are so many unanswered questions, we don't have the whole picture. But I think the pieces are starting to come together in ways that we didn't expect. There are things about our past, things that we've forgotten or been forced to forget. And I think it's time we start remembering." He paused, as if the weight of his own words hung heavy in the room. Zurika felt a flicker of unease at his declaration. Remembering was dangerous. She knew that the galaxy's history was filled with lost empires and broken civilizations whose remnants still haunted the farthest reaches of space. Entire species that had been wiped out because they had tried to reach too far or uncover things that were better left hidden. But there was something in Elias's voice, something determined, that made her hesitate. Was it possible that humanity could withstand the knowledge of their true past, that they could rebuild something that had been lost for so long? Or would they fall like so many others had before them? And then it hit her: what if this wasn't just about the language? What if this wasn't just about uncovering the past? But what if humanity had always known that something was missing, something they had lost? And that they had been searching for it all along, searching for the knowledge of their origins, the connection to the stars, the history that had been hidden from them the entire time? Was that why they were so driven, so eager to explore, so willing to take risks? Because deep down they knew there was something greater waiting to be discovered, something that was theirs by right. She looked out the window again at the sprawling landscape of Earth, below them the vastness of the planet, stretching out like a living organism, with so much left to uncover, so many hidden places where secrets were buried beneath the surface. She felt the pull of those mysteries, just as the humans did, and for the first time since she had arrived, she felt like she understood them in a way that was more than just academic, more than just a foreign observer trying to piece together the puzzle of a species she could never fully understand. Zurika turned back to Elias, her expression hardening with determination. "So what do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We uncover the truth," she said quietly. "We find the answers to the questions we've been asking for centuries. And we see what it means for all of us, for humanity. And for the galaxy, we can't keep living in the dark anymore. We can't ignore what we've lost. And I think it's time we start looking for it again." Zurika felt a strange sense of solidarity with Elias in that moment, as if their fates were now intertwined in a way she couldn't fully explain. She had come to Earth as an outsider, as someone tasked with studying this strange species. But now she realized that the journey she was on was no longer just about observation. It was about discovery, and it was about change. "There's a lot more at stake here than we know," she said, her voice almost a whisper. But her words felt heavy with the weight of truth. Elias nodded in agreement, his expression serious, as the two of them sat in the quiet room surrounded by the secrets of a past long forgotten. Neither of them knew what the future would hold, but they both knew that it was no longer something they could simply ignore or deny. The answers were out there, buried beneath the surface of the world they stood on, and now it was up to them to find them, to uncover what had been hidden, and to see if humanity was ready to face the truth of who they really were. The days that followed were filled with quiet urgency. Zirika could feel the shift in the air around her as she and Elias began to dig deeper into the hidden layers of humanity's past. There was a new weight in the air, a sense of expectation that they were standing at the edge of something vast, something that could reshape everything they thought they knew about Earth and its people. The language was just the first clue, and now they had to unravel the rest of the story. What had happened to humanity's forgotten history? What had they once been a part of? And where had it all gone? They began their research in earnest, searching through ancient texts and obscure records that had been long overlooked by mainstream humanity. Some of them were centuries old, others were even older than that, yet there was a strange pattern to the information they uncovered. It was as if humanity had once been part of something far greater, a galactic network of civilizations that spanned the stars, a vast empire that had risen and fallen before the galaxy even knew it existed. And somewhere in the fragmented pages of history were whispers of this lost connection buried beneath the surface of Earth's own records. Elias had access to some of the most ancient archives on Earth, and as they combed through the information, Zirika began to see how deeply intertwined humanity's history was with that of the galaxy. The evidence was everywhere. Though it had been hidden in plain sight, humanity had once been connected to the stars in ways it could scarcely understand now. They had been part of a larger story, one that had been lost to the sands of time, and yet the signs were all around them, remnants of the past embedded in their myths, their language, their culture, and the stars themselves. Zirika couldn't help but wonder how much of this history was known to other species, how much had been concealed and forgotten for centuries by the galactic powers who had long since moved on from Earth. How many others had known of humanity's place in the greater galactic picture, and why had it been erased by her own people, by the Tana Dominion, who had so carelessly dismissed humanity as insignificant for so long? She met Elias's gaze across the table as they pored over the ancient data, the same realization dawning on both of them that they had discovered something monumental, something that could change the very fabric of the galaxy itself. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth of humanity's past, it was about the future, what would happen when the rest of the galaxy learned that humanity had once been part of something much larger than anyone had realized, and could they handle that knowledge? Could the galaxy handle the truth of Earth's forgotten legacy? "We're on the edge of something big," Zirika said quietly, her voice low, but filled with a sense of awe and dread. All at once, Elias nodded, his expression grave, but determined. "Yeah," he said, "but the more we learn, the more it feels like we're stepping into a storm, one we might not be able to control. The more we dig, the more questions we find. And I'm starting to wonder if we're really prepared for what we're about to uncover. Because whatever it is, it's not just a human history, it's something that could affect every species in the galaxy." Zirika leaned back in her chair, her mind racing as she took in his words. They were right, it wasn't just about humanity anymore, it was about everyone. And that realization made the stakes feel higher than ever. It wasn't just about discovering the truth of a forgotten civilization. It was about whether or not humanity was ready to confront that truth, and whether or not the galaxy was ready to accept it. Because once the knowledge of humanity's true past came to light, there would be no going back. There would be no way to ignore the fact that Earth had once been a part of something far greater than anyone had realized, something that had been hidden for centuries. But the questions still remained. How had humanity fallen from grace? How had they gone from being part of a vast galactic empire to being relegated to a primitive world on the outskirts of the galaxy? Zirika knew that they had to keep digging, they had to uncover the full scope of what had happened to humanity. But as they delved deeper, the truth became more elusive. It was as if the answers were deliberately hidden beneath layers of deception and misinformation. The records were fragmented, the stories were incomplete, and every time they thought they were getting closer to the truth, another piece of the puzzle slipped out of reach. Zerika knew that they couldn't stop now. No matter how difficult or dangerous the journey became, they had to keep moving forward. They had to uncover the truth of humanity's past, and whatever they found, it was no longer just about understanding Earth. It was about understanding the galaxy and the forces that had shaped it, and the hidden power that Earth still carried deep within its core. Elias looked up from his notes as if sensing her resolve, and met her eyes once again with a shared understanding. "We won't stop until we know everything," he said firmly, his voice filled with the same determination that Zerika felt deep within her. "We can't stop now, not when we're this close to the truth." Zerika nodded silently, knowing that the path ahead would be dangerous and full of uncertainty, but there was no turning back now. They had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back to the way things were before. The knowledge of humanity's true past was a fire that burned too brightly to ignore, and they were its keepers now, whether they were ready or not. The days blurred together as Zerika and Elias pressed on their research, becoming more frantic with each passing hour. The questions piled up faster than they could answer them, and every new discovery seemed to raise even more mysteries. Humanity's past was becoming a labyrinth, a vast web of connections and lost threads that seemed impossible to untangle. But neither of them was willing to give up. The truth was just out of reach, and they both knew it. The deeper they dug, the more they felt the weight of what they were uncovering, not just about Earth, but about the galaxy itself. One evening, as they sat in the dimly lit room surrounded by data terminals and ancient manuscripts, Zerika's eyes fell upon a particularly old and worn text. It was a book she had almost overlooked. It was buried beneath a pile of lesser records, but something about it caught her attention. It wasn't like anything they had come across before. It was a first-hand account written by someone who had been there, someone who had witnessed the events that had led to humanity's fall from grace. She reached for the book, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it to the first page. The text was written in the same ancient language Elias had spoken, but this time it was clearer. It was more than just a collection of words. It was a story, a narrative that spoke of a time long before Earth's history had been officially recorded. Zerika's heart raced as she began to translate the text, her mind processing the words with a speed that startled her. It spoke of a galactic alliance that spanned the stars and of a pivotal moment in time when humanity had been an integral part of that alliance. It was a time of great prosperity and technological advancement, when Earth had been a beacon of knowledge and power. But something had gone horribly wrong. The alliance had fractured, and in the chaos that followed, Earth had been abandoned, left to fend for itself in a galaxy that no longer remembered its significance. Zerika's mind struggled to comprehend the implications of what she was reading. She had always assumed that humanity had been a small and insignificant species lost in the vastness of space, but now she was beginning to understand that Earth had once been a center of power and influence in the galaxy, that it had been part of something much larger and much more dangerous than anyone had ever realized. The fall of the Alliance had left Earth vulnerable and unprepared for the power struggles that had followed, and in the aftermath humanity had been forced into isolation. Its history obscured, its potential buried beneath layers of time and forgetfulness. She looked up at Elias, who had been watching her intently. He must have sensed the significance of what she had found. His expression was a mixture of awe and fear. As she shared the translation with him, he listened in silence, his face growing more somber with each passing line of text. The story they were uncovering was more than just the history of one species. It was the history of the galaxy itself, the rise and fall of civilizations, the shifting tides of power, and the delicate balance that held the stars together. Elias exhaled slowly after a long pause. "So this is it," he said quietly. "This is what they tried to erase. This is the truth that humanity's been hiding from itself." Zerika nodded, her mind still reeling as she absorbed the enormity of the discovery. They had uncovered something that no one had known or dared to acknowledge. Earth's history was not just a story of survival. It was a story of power, of lost empires and forgotten alliances, and the potential for rebirth. "We have to keep going," she said, her voice steady now, even as her mind raced. Were just beginning to understand what humanity really is, what they were meant to be, and what they could become. Elias' eyes met hers, And for a moment, Zereka saw the same determination reflected in him that she felt within herself. The weight of their discovery had become a shared burden and a shared responsibility. They were no longer just uncovering history, they were shaping the future. The next few days were a blur of frantic research and late nights as they pieced together more fragments of the past. The more they uncovered, the more they began to realize how deeply Earth's history was intertwined with the galaxy's larger narrative. There were mentions of ancient alliances and galactic wars, of artifacts and technologies that had been hidden away on Earth for millennia. And as they continued to dig deeper, Zereka couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something far more dangerous than they could imagine. There were whispers in the texts of a powerful force that had been at the center of the Alliance, a force that had been responsible for its rise and its fall, a force that had been lost to time and forgotten by all. But a few. Humanity had once known this force intimately, but it had been sealed away, hidden in the depths of Earth's forgotten history. And now Zereka was beginning to fear that the secrets they were uncovering weren't just pieces of a lost past, they were clues to something far more dangerous, something that could have catastrophic consequences if it was ever unleashed. "We have to be careful, Elias," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We're not just digging into humanity's history, we're digging into something much older, something that could change everything. If it's ever discovered, we have to find it first. We have to make sure it's kept hidden, no matter what." Elias met her gaze with a mixture of fear and resolve. "I agree. But we can't stop now, Zereka. We're so close to the truth, we can't turn back now, no matter the cost." The weight of Elias's words settled over Zereka like a heavy fog as they both sat in the dimly lit room surrounded by the remnants of humanity's lost history. Each new discovery felt like a step deeper into a vast unknown, and the more they uncovered, the more she felt the looming presence of something far darker than they had anticipated. It was as if they were digging into the heart of a long-buried secret, something that had been hidden for a reason. And the closer they came to unearthing it, the more they realized how dangerous their pursuit had become. Zereka's mind raced as she tried to process everything they had uncovered so far: the ancient alliance, the powerful force at the center of it, the fact that humanity had once held the key to something far more significant than any of them could have imagined. It was all too much to fully comprehend. But what chilled her to the bone was the underlying current of fear that seemed to run through every text, every clue they had found. It wasn't just about lost history, it was about something waiting to be rediscovered. It's something that could alter the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The artifact mentioned in the texts was always vague, a force or power that had been sealed away for centuries, hidden beneath the surface of Earth and locked away from the galaxy. But no one seemed to know exactly what it was or where it was hidden. All the records were fragmented and incomplete. There were whispers of a great war, a battle between ancient civilizations that had torn the Alliance apart and scattered the remnants of their once great empire across the stars, and humanity had been left with nothing but fragments of their former glory. Zereka could feel the pull of the unknown growing stronger with each passing moment. The need to uncover the truth had become a driving force within her. She had come to Earth to study its people, to learn about their potential. But now she realized that their potential was not just about their future. It was about their past, about the ancient power they had once wielded and the role they could play in the galaxy's future. But what if they weren't ready for it? She thought, suddenly, the weight of her responsibility crashing down on her. If humanity discovered the truth too soon, if they weren't prepared for the power they once held, could they control it? Or would it tear them apart the way it had done to the Alliance centuries ago? Zereka had seen what the pursuit of power could do to a species, the wars, the destruction, the chaos that always seemed to follow the revelation of forbidden knowledge. And she wasn't sure if humanity was strong enough to withstand it. She turned to Elias, who had been silent for a long time, staring at the terminal in front of him, his face a mask of concentration. As he sifted through the endless data and ancient records they had uncovered, it was clear he was as consumed by the search for answers as she was, but she knew he was also feeling the weight of what they were doing, the same sense of uncertainty that had been gnawing at her since they started their journey together. "Elias," she said, her voice steady, But with an edge of urgency, we have to be careful with what we're uncovering. We don't know the full extent of what this power is, or what it could do to humanity. If they find it, we might be opening a door that can never be closed. He glanced up at her, meeting her gaze with a look of grim understanding. "I know, Zereka, but we're already this far, we can't turn back now," he said, his voice low and filled with resolve. "We've seen the signs, and we know that whatever this force is, it's not just something that humanity could ignore forever. It's part of their history, part of what makes them who they are, and it's going to change everything whether we like it or not." Zereka felt a cold shiver run down her spine as his words echoed in her mind. She knew he was right. They couldn't stop now. They were too deep into the search to turn back. But the more they uncovered, the more she wondered if they were in over their heads. What if they weren't ready for the truth? What if humanity couldn't handle the weight of their own history? The path they had chosen was a dangerous one, and she knew that there would be no going back. Once the truth was revealed, no matter how carefully they tried to hide it or control it, it would change everything. The entire galaxy's understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos would be rewritten, and that kind of power could never be underestimated. Zereka turned away from Elias and stared out the window, the vastness of space stretching out before her. She felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Every decision from here on out would have consequences, and she had to make sure they were prepared for what was to come. But as she stood there looking at the stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something far more catastrophic than they had anticipated, a revelation that would not only change humanity, but would also shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about the universe. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the tension in the air thickening with every passing second. "We have to finish this," she thought. "We have to find the answers before it's too late." The search had become all-consuming. They could no longer look at their work as mere research or exploration. It had become a race against time, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them like a force that threatened to collapse everything they had ever known. Zereka had seen the warning signs in the texts, in the fragments of information. They had uncovered the power they were searching for was not just forgotten, it was dangerous. And if humanity was ever to discover the full extent of what they had once held in their grasp, it could tear everything apart. The galaxy was vast, but the consequences of revealing such a truth would ripple through the stars in ways they couldn't predict. Elias was becoming more withdrawn, his once calm demeanor now tinged with uncertainty. Every hour they spent in the depths of their research seemed to take a toll on him. He would stare at the data with a furrowed brow, as if searching for an answer he couldn't find. There were moments when Zereka caught glimpses of his fear, hidden behind the quiet determination. But he never voiced it aloud. She could tell he felt the same weight she did, the fear that the knowledge they were unearthing would be too much for humanity to bear. But they couldn't stop now. No matter how much the weight of it pressed down on them, they had to finish what they started, because the truth was too important to leave buried any longer. The secrets they were uncovering had the potential to reshape everything humanity knew about themselves and their place in the galaxy. Zereka found herself torn between the desire to continue and the fear of what they might awaken. What if this force, this ancient power they were searching for, was too much to control? What if humanity was not ready to understand the depths of their own history? The potential for destruction seemed endless, and the closer they got to uncovering the final pieces of the puzzle, the more they realized how little they truly knew about the full scope of the past. One evening, as they pored over the last of the ancient records, Zereka came across a hidden document buried deep within the archives. It was a map, a star chart that pointed to a location deep within the galaxy, a place that hadn't been explored in millennia. It was marked with an insignia that Zereka immediately recognized as the symbol of the ancient alliance, the very empire that had once united countless civilizations under a single banner. And the location on the map was unmistakable. It was Earth, the final resting place of the Alliance's greatest secret. Zereka's breath caught in her throat as she showed the map to Elias. His eyes widened as he took in the star chart. They had uncovered. "This is it," he said softly. "The final piece. We've been looking for. This is where it all started and where it all ended, the location of the artifact." Zerika stared at the map, her mind racing. The coordinates pointed to a place deep within the heart of Earth itself. The artifact wasn't hidden in the stars, as they had initially thought. It was buried beneath the surface of the very world. They were standing on the power that humanity had once wielded. Was not a relic of a distant galaxy, it was part of the Earth itself, and now they were about to uncover it. "We need to go there," Zerika said, her voice firm. "We have to find it before anyone else. As if humanity finds out about this before we're ready, there's no telling what could happen." Elias looked at her with a mixture of fear and determination. "I agree, but we don't know what's waiting for us down there. Whatever this artifact is, it's been hidden for a reason, and we have no idea what we're walking into." Zerika nodded, feeling the weight of his words, but she also knew that there was no choice. They couldn't turn back now. The knowledge of humanity's true history had to be revealed, but it had to be done on their terms. They couldn't let anyone else get their hands on the power they were about to uncover. They packed their things, quickly preparing for the journey to Earth's core, the final destination in their quest for the truth. As they left the facility and made their way to the transport, Zerika couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The closer they got to the place where it all began, the more she felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. This was the moment that would change everything, and she wasn't sure if humanity was ready for what they were about to discover. But there was no turning back now. The truth was waiting for them, and they had to face it head-on, no matter what the cost. The journey to Earth's heart was long and filled with tension. The silence between them as they traveled seemed to echo the uncertainty that hung heavy in the air. Neither of them spoke, much as the reality of what they were about to do settled in. They both knew that this was the point of no return. Once they uncovered what was buried beneath the surface, there would be no way to go back to the world they had known, to the lives they had lived before the secret was revealed. Zerika sat in the transport, staring out the window at the distant view of Earth. Below, the planet was vast and full of mysteries, and she felt the weight of its ancient past pressing down on her shoulders. She didn't know what they would find when they reached the core, but she knew one thing for certain: they couldn't stop now. The truth had to be uncovered, even if it meant facing the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever known. The transport descended into the heart of Earth. The air grew thicker as they approached the surface. The energy surrounding them felt charged with a kind of ancient power that Zerika couldn't explain. Each passing moment seemed to draw them deeper into something vast and unknowable. She felt it as a presence, something far older than anything she had encountered before. It was as though the planet itself was alive and watching them as they neared the coordinates they had uncovered. The final destination was a hidden underground facility, buried beneath layers of rock and metal, ancient and forgotten by all but a few. The doors creaked open with an eerie groan as they stepped into the dimly lit chamber, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were lined with strange symbols etched in a language older than anything they had encountered before. It felt like a tomb, but also like the heart of something that had once been alive. Elias stood next to her, his eyes wide with awe and trepidation. "This is it," he whispered softly, as if the words themselves might disturb the stillness. They had uncovered the final resting place of the Alliance's secret, the artifact that could change everything, and yet neither of them was prepared for what lay ahead. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that grew stronger as they ventured deeper into the heart of the facility. The air was heavy with tension, each breath a reminder that they were on the cusp of discovering something far beyond their understanding. As they reached the center of the chamber, Zerika felt it a shift in the air, as if something had awakened, something ancient and powerful. She turned to Elias, her voice low and cautious. "We have to be careful. Whatever this is, it's been waiting for a long time." Elias nodded, his expression grim and tense. "I know, but we've come this far. We can't turn back now." They approached the central structure in the room, a massive obelisk covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer in the low light. It radiated an otherworldly energy that Zerika could feel deep in her bones. It was the artifact, the key to humanity's past and future. But as they stepped closer, she could sense a deep unease, a warning echoing from within the very heart of the structure. Without thinking, Zerika reached out her hand to touch the obelisk. As her fingers brushed against its surface, a sudden flash of light enveloped them both. The room seemed to shift and twist as the energy inside the artifact surged through her body. Her mind filled with visions of the past, the rise and fall of the ancient alliance, the civilizations that had once been united, and the catastrophic event that had shattered everything in its wake. She saw humanity standing at the center of it, all the powerful force lost to time and forgotten by all. The vision faded just as quickly as it had come, leaving Zurika breathless and shaken. She staggered back from the artifact, her mind reeling from the flood of knowledge that had just overwhelmed her. Elias reached out to steady her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "I think so," she replied, her voice trembling. "The truth, it's all true. Humanity wasn't just a part of the Alliance. They were the key, they were the power at the center of it all. But something happened, something went wrong, and they were cast aside, forgotten by the galaxy." Elias's expression darkened as he looked at the obelisk. "The power that humanity once wielded is dangerous, Zurika," he said quietly. "We have to decide what to do with it before it gets into the wrong hands." Zurika stared at the artifact, her mind racing. They had uncovered the truth, humanity's lost legacy, but the weight of that truth was almost too much to bear. The knowledge of the past had been unleashed, and there was no going back now. The future of humanity and the galaxy was in their hands, and they had to make a choice. How much of the past should be revealed, and how much should remain buried for the sake of everyone? "We can't let it fall into the wrong hands," she said firmly. "We have to make sure humanity is ready before they ever learn the truth."